And welcome back everybody to another HTML tutorial. In today's lesson, we're going to learn two primary things. One of them is how to make a cool nav menu that very customizable and you can use it for any of your web pages. The other thing we're going to learn is a better way to style. In the past, we've been using what's called inline styles, where you have to go to every element and you have to define those characteristics for each and everything. It's a good way to learn the concept of styles and that process, but it's not very time effective. Today we'll use a strategy called Internal Embedded CSS, and it works great when you're styling single web page sites. It's all in one location. It's way easier, and I can't wait to show you. We'll go ahead and begin here. Let's go to our Web 1 folder where we've been saving our projects all along, and we'll make another folder in here, and we will call this int embed, short for internal embedded. Once we have that done, then we'll get to our text editor, and we have our basic skeleton that we've been using, and I'll show you that here a little longer in a second. But first we need to save. Even if you don't have anything on your text editor yet, we'll still go to save as, and we'll find our trusty Web 1 projects folder and find our int embed folder. On the little drop down, we'll go to our hypertext markup language, and we will call this index.html. Alright, and then on here we've used this a million times in class. Doc type HTML, we have the HTML tags, we have the head section. We put the title in. I just titled this Internal Embedded CSS. We had our meta char set UTF-8 for our characters of our page, and then our meta name, description, and for the content I just put on here how to style in one location for one page. And then down here for the body, we're going to make a simple web page for this, so we can just kind of focus mostly on the nav menu and the CSS. Alright, looking at our semantic HTML tags we've been using in the past, we can use header. That'll be at the top of our page, obviously, and in the header we will put in our H1 tag. This is our big text, and in here I'm going to type in home page. Underneath the header, it's common to have the nav menu, so we'll put in a nav tags here and close the nav tag. Nav, not have. There we go. And if you remember when we made our lists, I showed you that one method to make a list, and we called it cool list. And it wasn't really a list at all, and it looked like some buttons. That's kind of the intro getting us ready for this nav menu. We're going to use it here today. So we'll use an unordered list for this nav menu, and we'll put in a list item, and then in the list item we'll put in a tag, and we'll go href equals index.html, and then we'll close our a tag, and then right between the opening and closing of the a tag we'll just type in home. So that's one list item. We'll copy that, and then we're going to paste this so that we have 4 total links. So there's 2, 3, 4, and that'll be what's in there. For the rest of these, we'll just kind of set this up for our next section, because we're going to use this page for not only this week's lesson, but we're going to use it for next week's lesson also. So the second one, we'll call this one, or we'll say it's going to news.html. The next one we have is going to be about, and then the final one is going to be contact. And we're not going to make all those pages today. We're just going to use index, but it'll save us a little time in our next section. Another thing we want to add here is in this top link, in the A section, we want to give this a class equals quotation marks active, because we want this one to behave just a little bit differently than the others when we start coding. And we've used classes before. And then also, we'll go down here to our last link where it says li, and we're going to give this a style, or I'm sorry, we're going to give this a class, and we'll call it, I'm really in style mode, we'll give it a class align right, and then we can finally just change the text for these links. So this one we can call news, this one's about, and then this one will be contact. That works for our nav menu for right now. Anytime when we're doing these CSS things like with internal embedded, I really like to do all the HTML first and then have the rest of it, like, just worry about the styling afterwards. It makes it a lot easier. Then we have our section underneath our nav. And in that section, we'll put in an article. And then in the article, we will put in an H2 for a slightly smaller heading. And we'll call this one Article 1. Then we'll put in a paragraph in there. And we'll just type some filler text in here. This is a paragraph that is related to Article 1. All right. Underneath that paragraph, we'll put in our horizontal rule there. And that will work for what we need for the article. We can copy that. Control C. And then we'll paste it in here underneath, so that way we have 2 articles in our section. And then I will call this one just Article 2, and then I'll change the one here to 2 to fit in there a little bit easier. And then after the section, at the very bottom of the page, we will have our footer. And we'll put in a paragraph. And our usual page created by, and just put your name there. And then and copy semicolon and a date. Alright, this looks pretty good for the page. I will check this out. I'll make sure I don't have any issues. Always good to check this from time to time. And it looks like just a regular plain old page. This is nice. Alright, so like I said, in the past, we'd been styling this web page in each of these elements, and it takes forever. Well, what we can do now is Internal Embedded CSS. This will go up here in the head section. So I will go right underneath my meta name description, and I'm going to put in a tag here that is going to be called style. And I'll close it right here. Alright, and this is going to be the place where we write all of the rules for our page. Now sometimes the pages get to be pretty complex, as you've seen even this early in our class. So I like to think of like big picture items first, like what's the largest elements to smallest, and then I go from the top of the page to the bottom of the page. So a common way to start this is with an asterisk and then our fancy schmancy brackets, these curved brackets here. I like to start off with this because there's always like defaults that HTML and CSS uses, and sometimes it's like, why is there that little gap there in the page when I didn't say there should be a gap? I can set all those to 0 right at the beginning with this universal styling. And so this is just what I was taught by a good web teacher from a class I'd taken, so I use it. And I'll go margin :0 semicolon, padding :0 semicolon, and border :0 semicolon. All right, and then I can save this. If I go to my page and I refresh it, you can see right there it gets rid of that extra space that just happens to be there on default, and then that's going to allow me to define any kind of margin, padding, or border, anything like that on my own terms, and I don't have to worry about how it's going to mess with the things that are already in there. So I like to start off with that with my CSS. Okay, the next thing is when I'm thinking of the entire web page, the body's pretty big, can't get much bigger than the body of the whole HTML. So what I'll do is I define it here, body, fancy brackets, and then here I will go background hyphen color, and then I will use # D3 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 semicolon. All right. If I refresh that, we have this gray color back here. Now, everything we've done up to this point pretty much in class that I can think of has been semantic HTML, which is like body, nav, section, article. Those are semantic HTML. They're things where it's like, yeah, I kind of know what a header is just by the name of it, right? A footer, I kind of understand what that is just by the name of it. There's actually non-semantic elements, and this would be a good time to introduce one of these, and it's called the div. And so what we'll do here is we will put this div just right underneath the body. All right, so I'll open it here between the body and the header, and you can put a div anywhere. And then I'll close it down here just right before the closing of the body. So it's like the body contains the div, and then the div contains everything else that is inside there. So that works out pretty nicely. It is common where you'll have more than one div to your page, and sometimes you want them to behave a little bit differently. So what we'll do is we'll use that class identification. We'll go class equals, and in this case we will call this one page box. And there will be times you'll see people make an entire web page out of just divs. They might have a div with the class of header and div with the class of nav. I don't recommend doing it that way. Try to use those semantics whenever possible. But anytime where it's like I need something here but there's not really a name for it, it's a div. They have a name for it. It's a div, and you can give it a class name of whatever that you want. Alright, so now that we have div divided in our HTML, we can go up here and we can give this div a set of behaviors for its own. So maybe we'll go, or actually, and I shouldn't even call it div up here because we gave it a class, right? We called it page box. So since it's a class of page box, I can go dot page box, and then we can just illustrate how that works right there. And we'll go with our width of 70%, and then we will go down here and we'll say margin of auto And then underneath that, we'll go a background hyphen color of $FFF. That is white. So we'll look in here. And now we have this nice little page box. Now we do have these kind of ugly bullets from our list. We don't want those there, but we'll fix those here in a little bit. All right, next thing that we have. Looking at our page is our H1. Okay, do I want to style anything for the H1? We might as well. So we'll put an H1 on here. We'll put our fancy brackets there to the side of it. And we can go in here, font hyphen size, and then we'll go 60px semicolon. We'll enter that in, and now we have bigger text. So you could see, like, if our site or if our page had multiple H1s, instead of me having to change that on every single line, which would take forever, I can just do it in one place, conveniently up here in the style section. Underneath that, we have our unordered list for our nav menu, so I will use UL. And then I'll go list hyphen style hyphen type none. I want to get rid of those bullets that are in there. I can go, let's see what else we have here. I could go margin 0. I can go padding 0. And then overflow of hidden. And we haven't used overflow of hidden before, but basically what that does is if we have content that extends past that container, instead of it getting a horizontal scrolling bar, which we don't want, it'll just hide that extra content. So it helps things fit in there better, and it helps them to keep their same dimensions that we want them to have. And then I'm going to go background hyphen color, and we'll go #333 333. Let's take a look and see what this does to our page. All right, good. So this is our nav area. Clearly we have these links that are hard to see, and they're vertical. We want them to be horizontally. So that's what we'll work on next. So underneath UL, we'll make a new one, and this will be for our list items, our LIs. Put our fancy brackets here, and we can use float left. And that's going to put them all in one line for us. We didn't have to go float left for each of those elements here. We didn't have to type that in. We just do it in one location up there. Isn't this so much better? Next one we'll do is with our hyperlinks. Now, it's common obviously for a web page to have multiple hyperlinks outside of a nav menu, so I want these to behave differently than how I want the rest of the hyperlinks that might show up on my page. So what I can do is I can specify these particular hyperlinks just by saying where they're located. So I could say up here, any list item hyperlink and that way if I use hyperlinks elsewhere in my document, they're not going to be affected. And I can go display block. I could go color for the text there, $FFF semicolon, and I could go text hyphen align center if you want the text centered in those areas. I will go padding 14, so I want it to be wider than just the text. I want it to be kind of wider, like a button, like we did in our list section of this class. So padding 14 px pixels, that's important. And then I'll go text hyphen decoration none, because those hyperlinks have underlines and I don't want them to be there. And we can go font hyphen family, And let's see, I could go Arial, comma, Helvetica, comma, sans hyphen serif. So that's kind of an example we used before. So if they don't have Arial on their computer, we want Helvetica. If they don't have any of those, just some other kind of sans serif font will work. And I'll put in my semicolon. And then after font family, we can go font hyphen weight and bold. I do want that text to stick out a little more. So let's see how this looks. Pretty good. We see we have the padding around there, and this is starting to look like an actual web page with a nav menu. Way better than what we've done before. All right, scrolling down. We do have our nav menu, but I think it would be more engaging if it did something when we hovered our cursor over it. So what we'll do here is we'll go li space a, and then we'll put a colon, and we'll use hover. This is a new style that we haven't learned about in class before, but we have to use it in CSS for it to work better. And we'll say what's going to happen when we hover over it. We'll change the background color to $111,111. It'll be like a real dark gray. And if I save that and I look in here and I refresh this, when I move my cursor over, it's real subtle but effective. And it just makes it a little more engaging on the page, and they can tell where exactly they're going to be going by hovering over that. It's kind of good to know where those buttons are. All right, those look pretty good. The next thing we have, and this is still in this nav menu because I'm just kind of going from top to bottom at this point. We have our class of active for this link here. So I'm going to go dot active, and whatever nav menu, whichever these we declare active, it's going to behave differently. So on here I'm going to type in background hyphen color. I'm going to go $E1A D01. When I refresh this, home is active, so that one shows up right there. And on my other pages, like when I get to that point, obviously, like news, on my news page, not my index HTML, I would have the news one with the class of active instead of the index. So that way, whatever page you're on, that one's kind of highlighted. Now when I hover over this, I do change that color. It's a little distracting. So we can fix that easily just over here in the hover. And I can put a colon after hover. So like everything that it's hovering is going to change to this color. But I could say, or anything that is not parentheses dot active is going to do that. I'll save that and refresh in here. Now when I hover over that, that's not like really flashing or blinking at me and being distracting. So I think that works a little better, so I'll keep it like that. Down here we have this align right. So I'm going to go dot align right. And this one I will say we'll go float right semicolon, just to add a little more to our web page. So now it slides this one over to the right, and that looks pretty good. Sometimes when you have things like that, especially with these active here, we can go down to our HTML and we can leave like some documentation for us or for someone else on this page if we're making this a template for somebody to use. And so I can put a less than sign and an exclamation mark and then 2 hyphens, and then I'll put in here something like change the active class to whichever page that it matches to, or something like that, and then 2 hyphens in there. So that way when somebody goes through and they see this comment here, then they could say, oh yeah, okay, I do need to change that active. So when I create, if I make a copy of this page and I call it news, so I don't have to retype everything in there, I just need to be sure that I move class active down to the news anchor tag and then erase it from the index. So you want those to match up. So that'll be a good note to myself for later that we can use, and kind of makes your web page a little easier to work with on others with there. All right, so we're done, I think, with that nav menu. A few other things that we can put in here. We can go with like our footer. We'll change our H2s, I guess, first. We'll go H2. And in here we'll go color, and then # E1A D01 semicolon, and I'll save this. And now we have that consistent color theme going in there. That looks pretty nice. And then finally down here at the bottom we can code the footer. So here's the footer for this. We'll say text -align is center. Font -style is italic. So you don't have to use the EM tags if you don't want to. You can just fix it up here. And I think that looks pretty good. So let's look at our page. And on here, this is looking all right. Now, one thing that we notice about these pages, and we haven't really come across this so far at this point in time, is our footer is up here in this area. So how can we make this extend down to the bottom of the page? And one way to do that is with Flexbox. So if we go up here to the top and we find our page box, and we'll go in here, and if we type in min height of 100 VH and the display of flex and the flex direction of column, there's multiple ways you can do this, but this is probably the easiest. And then we need to go down here to the footer area, and then we need to add margin -top, which is going to be auto. And then depending of whether or not you want the footer to be down right at the bottom of your screen, we can give it a little bit of padding also. So we can say like padding like 50 px space 0 semicolon. All right. Now that we have that, we can go to our screen, and I'll refresh this, and now it extends this down to the bottom. If I didn't have the padding, this would be just right down at the bottom, so you can always kind of adjust that, if you will. Or sometimes you're just going to have more information than just one line in your footer, and you don't have to worry about adjusting the pattern with that anyway. So I appreciate you watching this. Let me know if you have any questions, or if yours isn't showing up right. Be happy to help out, and we'll get you next time on our next lesson.